You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome to Law Talk on Germantown Municipal Television. My name is Vince Perryman and I am a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Law Talk focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show covers estate planning. With us now is attorney Michelle Gwinn of MidSouthAttorneys.com. Michelle, thanks for being with us today. You know, I think the question here is where do we begin when we're having a discussion of estate planning? And probably the best thing is to explain to people what estate planning is, because I know so many people, they hear it all the time, but they're not real clear on what is an estate plan.
Right. Well, estate plans often look different for different people because they really should be individualized, but they really encompass just four main documents. Usually that would be a will, a last will and testament, a durable power of attorney for health care, a power of attorney for financial reasons, and advanced directives.
Okay, and the whole point of it with an estate plan is to make sure that your wishes are carried out after you're gone and have passed away. Or in the alternative, if you become incapacitated, that your wishes are known as far as what you want, how you want your finances handled during that incapacity, or how you want your health care handled during that incapacity.
Exactly.
Okay. And now with estate planning, I think there's a lot of confusion out there as to, are these legal documents that are drafted by an attorney, or is this something that I go to a CPA for, or is this something I go to a financial planner for? I know I run into those questions a lot of times from individuals. You want to shed some light on that?
There are a lot of people out there that claim to do estate planning, and they really are not providing people with adequate legal documents that would be within the confines of the law in Tennessee. There are even things that you can download online from like LegalZoom and different websites like that offer like fill-in-the-blank wills. But the biggest problem that people tend to run into is that they're not attested documents, and they often will fail when they're entered into probate in the Tennessee courts, because Tennessee has very specific guidelines about what a will has to encompass and what is required to make it legally binding.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting too when you talk about the fill-in-the-blank documents and some of these online things. We now have Susie Orman, who's well known, selling a will and trust packet that it's not individualized. It's, you'll answer all of these questions and it's going to fill in the blanks for you, and she's really good at selling, but it's not an individualized plan. Why should these plans be individualized?
Well, just like people are different, people's estates are different. I have children. I have 5 children. Somebody else might not have children at all. They may have pets that they need to provide for or need someone to care for after they pass away. People have different sizes of estates. So somebody may have a very large estate that needs to be spread across numerous beneficiaries. Somebody may have no one at all and need to leave all of their things to charity. So if you're looking at all of those, different pieces of the puzzle, it requires an individualized plan to really make sure that that individual's property and estate is taken care of the way that they would choose for it to be taken care of after they've passed on.
So I guess one of the first steps that somebody should ask themselves when they're looking at needing to get estate planning done is how complex is what I have? How would somebody determine that?
Well, I think probably the best alternative when they're looking at trying to decide how complex their estate is would be to consult an estate planning attorney, mm-hmm. someone who deals with that type of thing on a daily basis. Not all estates are really complex, but even the most simplistic estate really requires at least a will and durable power of attorney for health care. Somebody who has almost nothing, even if they just own a small piece of real estate, still needs something to show, how they want it to be distributed upon their death.
Right, and I think something too that where we get into some of the confusion on what professionals handle this is that if you have a very complex estate planning issue, then you're probably going to need your CPA, your financial planner, whoever's handling financial assets for you, as well as your attorney, all working together in a team.
And there can be some collaboration there between the professionals, regarding the big complex estates where you do have, constant contact with a CPA or a financial advisor, people along those lines. And they can collaborate with the attorney to come up with the best plan possible and make sure that you still have the end result be a legally binding document.
Because I think that that's the important thing that a lot of people tend to miss is these are legal documents and they require certain things under the law of Tennessee, whether that be a holographic will that's all in someone's own handwriting, or whether that be a typed will that requires 2 witnesses and things like that, and that the law is always changing, so you've got to have that legal perspective in there. But on the complexity, you also, if there's tax ramifications or something like that, then that's where the CPA becomes very important. But then the other thing is a lot of people aren't always certain as to what they have when they know they've got investments. Then you've got to talk to the financial guy that's handling those investments to figure that out. And if one part is not talking to the other part, it can really create a problem.
Well, and the other issue that people run into when they go with these fill-in-the-blank type wills and feel like they've appropriately then devised their property is they end up having a will that can't be probated, and according to laws in Tennessee, they've died intestate. So then the law decides how their property is distributed. So it really boils down to a simple fact: to protect yourself and protect your heirs, the best option is to visit with an attorney and have an estate plan put together.
Right, and I think one of the things there too is when we talk about heirs, a lot of people aren't real certain as to who their heirs are, but one of the most important things to any parent is making sure that their children are going to be taken care of. Well, the other part of it is people have to think too, if I have kids, who do I want to take care of my children if my spouse and I happen to both pass away? And that's something that estate planning documents do. And as well as saying, here's what I've got, here's where I want it to go to, and here's who I need to do this. But we'll get into more in this discussion when we return on estate planning. Please stay with us.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
They say that when you're facing extreme danger, your life flashes before you. If you think that's sad, consider facing it before you even have enough life to flash before your eyes. Deaths and injuries can be prevented by using the right car seat. Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat to know what is appropriate for each age and size.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. I'm Vince Perryman, and you're watching Law Talk. Joining us on our show today is Michelle Gwinn of MidSouthAttorneys.com. We're discussing estate planning. Michelle, before the break, we got into what estate planning is, and we were starting to touch on why you would need to have estate planning. So, we were talking about some very simple plans and then some very complex plans with this. And I think one place where we had stopped was when you have children, why estate planning is so important there.
It's one thing that young families don't talk about often enough, and that is what happens to the children if both parents, are killed or die unexpectedly. Young people tend to feel like they're invincible. They don't want to deal with mortality, so they may talk about it amongst themselves or may say, hey, if something happened to us, we want Susie to take care of the kids, but there's never anything memorialized in writing. And unfortunately, in those situations when families die or parents die and don't have a will or any legal documents that provide for the care of their children, the court then makes those decisions and will establish guardianship and will choose a guardian for the kids.
Right, and that can get into a nasty battle between the two sets of grandparents and all. And I think something else that's interesting with this is it's one of those that an estate plan is something that's fluid. You have to come back to it, because I had a very young family that when they had their first child, they came to me and had me draft a will and everything for them and what would happen to their son if something happened to them. Well, it was interesting, 10 years or so pass and they call me back up because it's the first time that they're actually going to be traveling without their son. And they got to thinking about that provision again. Well, wait a minute, do we still have who we really want in that spot? And then the other thing that it makes me think of too is when we see a new family that they're showing those proud pictures of their child on Facebook, and then they've got a photo of their friend, I don't know, Bob Beckett holding the baby, saying, oh, this is his godfather, Bob. Well, that's a nice title and everything, but unless you've got that in some sort of legal document, it's not going to do anything.
Right.
And then, so other groups that I think of in today's world, because we've got blended families and things like that, if you've got a blended family, you've definitely got to have wills and estate planning documents to kind of say, okay, well, do I want everybody treated equally? Do I want just my lineal heirs that have my blood taking, or do I want the stepchildren to take as well, and things like that? And then we've got sort of a new breed out there, which is the unmarried couples that are cohabitating, and Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, perfect example.
Right.
They chose not to get married, but then they have gotten married now,
Right.
so congratulations to them. But how would their estate be affected if one of them passed away in regards to, how is this passing?
Right, because through intestate succession, they are not considered heirs if they're not married, or there isn't some kind of legal document that then devises the property to that individual, unless they've somehow got something set up as a tenancy by the entirety, which is generally between husband and wife. So they would be tenants in common in a piece of real estate, which means that the Angelina Jolie would have ended up owning her property with Brad Pitt's family, and she wouldn't have had it all.
Yeah, or in the alternative, Brad Pitt suddenly owns a house with John Voight.
Right, exactly.
Well,
I was trying to bump him off first.
Well,
but,
okay. But so with that, there's all these complexities to it, and then another occurrence that I think is really important for people to start thinking about it is if you own real property in multiple states. Because in that case, am I correct that you're going to have to open all these ancillary estates in other states to be able to handle the real property that's over in California? You got to open a California probate as well as your Tennessee probate. Same thing, Arkansas, and all of these.
Well, it becomes a real mess when you start dealing with things that are all over the country, and definitely becomes easier if things are set up ahead of time. Not only do you protect your property, your real property, by having an estate plan, but you protect your heirs because you save them the headache of having to deal with all of it or having the property devised by the court. You save them money and fees, attorney's fees, all types of things by just having things set up ahead of time.
And that where you've got these multiple properties and everything is where you need some little more complex plan where you use a revocable trust. But the trick is on these revocable trusts, you've got to get them funded and put the assets in the trust, because so many times I see where somebody comes to me and they've got this big, pretty red binder with their trust document in it, but whoever drafted it just didn't take any of the assets and transfer it in there, so we still have to go down to probate at the time this person dies.
Because if the revocable trust is done properly, then it doesn't have to be probated, but the assets have to be, the trust has to be properly funded in order for you to be able to avoid probate.
Mm-hmm. And then I think another important point on estate planning is if you're planning to make charitable bequests, you know, say you want to make a gift to the Germantown Municipal Television, then you've got to have that in an estate planning document. Otherwise, those charitable bequests aren't going to be made.
Well, and one of the things that people do not often think about with charitable bequests is, can the charity actually handle the item that you're leaving to them? And that's something that when you're developing an estate plan, you can take a look at, and you can actually contact the beneficiary and say, hey, you know, we're thinking about leaving you this piece of property. And some charities may say, well, you know, we'd rather just have the proceeds from the sale of the property rather than the property itself, because they may not be able to handle selling the property.
And I think a good example of that too is Salvation Army. Mm-hmm. You have to put in specific language if you want it to go to the Memphis chapter as opposed to the national chapter. Some of the same things with the different funds at St. Jude and some of this. So it's where you've got to communicate to know with that, and a good advisor can help you with that. Another thing I think you mentioned in the first segment was people that have pets. And I think that that's always interesting because pets are treated as property. So with that, you know, it's one where you may want to set up a trust for whoever has that. And I think we're running low on time with this segment, but when we return from our break, we'll talk more with Michelle Gwinn about estate planning. Please stay with us.
So they say it's a man's world? I don't see anybody's name on it.
While they were doing their thing, we slowly changed our own.
Today, women can do anything men can do. And there's one thing we're even better at.
Get caught buzz driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom.
It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. With us now is Michelle Gwinn. We're talking about estate planning. Michelle, we've covered what estate planning is, some of the issues in which you need it. So I think probably our last segment here should be about some of the nightmares that could occur. And I think one of the things is the couples that they're not married, but they live together, they have assets together. What can happen if there's no estate planning and one of them passes away?
This can end up being a real mess for everybody involved. Oftentimes what you will see happen is the property is then owned by the remaining part of the couple, and then what could have potentially been their in-laws. And then the in-laws decide that they're going to file a petition to partition, and the property gets sold, or, you know, we end up with a big mess between the two people.
A court action forcing the property to be sold,
Correct.
Which basically says that the other owner has first option to pay it off.
Right.
And then that's, I think, a good point too, because say all of the assets of their partner were left to the partner's family under the state law, which is the intestate succession, then there may not be funds
Right.
to pay off that other half.
Especially if this was like the displaced partner that stayed at home. You know, maybe there were children that were brought into this relationship, or maybe they had children and they just never married, kind of like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt had prior to their marriage. So you could have a person who wasn't working outside the home and was solely relying on their partner for all of their support and income, and now they're in a position where everything that they had has been taken away from them because there's not a plan and they haven't been provided for, and that partner's family now has it all.
You know, and we might have folks out there that are watching this and saying, well, my family wouldn't do that to my partner. But I think the important thing with all the nightmare situations where somebody thought that was you don't know what happens once you're dead, because
well, grief does strange things to people, and people tend to grasp at straws and anything that they can to try to hold on to little pieces of the person that they've lost. So oftentimes the most wonderful, loving families in the world become fractured messes because people have died and their property is being devised through intestate succession rather than, you know, through a will or other, you know, legal documents that were left.
And I think another important thing with it too is if you've done the estate planning correctly, it limits the risk of a will contest, because you can put things in there that say, well, if you contest any provision of this will and then define what you mean by contesting, you get 1 penny,
right,
or you don't take anything, which could then bind somebody's hands. And I've seen nightmares where you've got the patriarch of the family passes away, the matriarch is in the marital home, daughter moves in with her and takes care of her. They never update the joint will from when father passed away. And then you have the never-do-well sibling that after mom passes away says, well, you gave up your life and you moved into that house, but you know what? That house is half mine. I want you out of it, and I want you to pay me for the rent for the past 10 years.
Right.
And you just get into a complete mess with that. You've got all these attorney fees, and you got court costs and expenses, whereas if you went and had a professionally drafted will done, your family wouldn't be in the mess.
And you said something that's really important, professionally drafted. We had a situation in our own family where my grandparents had a will that was not adequately drafted, and the language was very poor. And they had used the word furniture instead of furnishings, and we had family members fighting over what that terminology meant. You know, is it everything in the house, or is it literally just pieces of furniture like the bedroom set? So you have to be very careful when you're talking about estate planning and going to, you know, you need to go to someone who does this on a daily basis and knows what they're doing, so that you can make sure that you're protecting not only your assets but your beneficiaries.
Yeah, and I think another good example here is when you've got children, if you're leaving them assets, making sure you've got it either going into a trust and making sure that it's not a spendthrift or somebody that's just going to spend willy-nilly overseeing that. You know, I've seen families where that's a concern because the parents are no longer together, and the one parent is the aunt, so to speak, and saves, and the other parent is the grasshopper and doesn't prepare for winter.
Right.
And you can imagine, okay, so I've amassed all of this, there's this life insurance policy that's going to take care of Luke, and then Luke's other parent comes in and just blows through that $1 million like there is no tomorrow. And then you've got your 5-year-old that's looking at 13 more years until he's at the age of majority, that what he was left with winds up not having anything.
Right.
And I think that that's important to where we get, you know, sometimes there's, selecting who that trustee is going to be is really important too.
It's just as important as selecting guardians, and you have to really think about the potential for those people to still be around and their ability to handle your child's legacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes, you know, it can end up being, if you didn't appoint someone, the crazy family member that gets appointed
Right.
that then, winds up stealing from your estate, and whether or not that gets caught or somebody is willing to do something about it becomes an issue, because you may have heirs that actually need the funds, but they don't have funds of their own to be able to challenge what this person that stepped in and got appointed as the fiduciary can do.
Right.
And the other things in these testamentary documents, you can waive some of the requirements that the court would otherwise put on your fiduciary. And you can also make the court aware of some of the potential issues, where you hate to put a provision in there about watch out for this person,
Right.
but what you
Sometimes
do,
you have to.
yeah, you can put stuff in there that says, under no authority should ever be given to this individual.
Right.
And I think too, if you've got a beneficiary that you're going to give to that is a spendthrift that can't handle money, then you've got to think too about, well, how am I going to gift to them?
And spendthrift, there's a spendthrift trust that can be established specifically for those types of individuals, because there always seems to be one in every family, somebody who can't handle their money and is blowing through mom and dad's as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And it's always interesting because our time is up for this edition of Law Talk, and we seem to always end these with the spendthrift. I would like to thank our guest for taking time out of her busy schedule and being with us to share her thoughts and insights. If you'd like more information about Law Talk or any other program on Germantown Municipal Television, please refer to our website at www.gmtvonline.org. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to join us next month for more discussion on legal topics. Until then, I'm Vince Perryman, and thank you for watching.